Greetings, everyone. I am Mark Brown, the 1995 world champion of public speaking. And I must tell you, I am absolutely thrilled today because today I have the honor, the joy, the blessing, and the privilege of introducing you to our newest world champion of public speaking, all the way from Cape Town, South Africa, the first South African world champion, and only the sixth woman to win that coveted title. Please help me welcome the newest member of my world champion family, Verity Price. Hello, Verity.
Hello, Mark. Wow, amazing to be here.
Well, we are just excited to meet you because there's great buzz around the world now, having the first world champion from the continent of Africa and in South Africa. What has it been like for you over the last couple of days since winning that title?
It has been extraordinary. It's been overwhelming. It's been the most incredible feeling. The love that I felt coming my way has been unbelievable, to be honest, and the excitement in Africa and Southern Africa is palpable. I think this means so much to my district and to the continent that finally we've brought this title to Africa, and now people are going, how do we keep it here?
Well, from me, from my fellow world champions, and from the Toastmasters universe, heartiest congratulations. We're all so proud of you. And I know everyone listening wants to know a little bit about the journey you took to get to the world stage, our second virtual conference. But what was the journey like? Where did it all begin for you as a Toastmaster?
Well, my Toastmasters journey began 10 years ago. So I'm one of those stories of someone who's been here a long time and been getting the most out of the organization that I could. And my first ever contest was in 2012, and my sister beat me at the club. I was very unimpressed. And she beat me with her CC6. For people who remember the legacy program, she'd only done 6 speeches. And I was already a professional speaker, so I was quite arrogant, thinking, I've got this. But she went on to come second to Ryan Avery in the semifinals that year.
Yeah.
And her journey, Kay Price Lindsay, put the name out there because she is my absolute idol, and she let me live in her spare room for a long time. Her journey through the contest really showed me how much you can grow as a speaker and as a person by going on the contest journey. I had no idea how much growth could happen in one speech. You know, you think you write a speech once and it's done, but watching her, I saw how much you could work on a speech. So when it came to entering last year, well, the beginning of this year, I knew that I had a lot of work ahead of me if I managed to go through the levels.
Now, when you entered, was your mindset one of, I will be the next world champion of public speaking, or I'm going to have fun, or somewhere in the middle?
That is a very good question. I had a strange experience, Mark. I did my semifinal speech. The challenge was actually my level 1 icebreaker when I started Pathways last year. And when I wrote it, something in me went, this could be a contest speech. And then another voice said, this could get you to the world finals. And I don't know where that voice came from because I haven't competed in 6 years. And it just stayed with me, this funny sense of maybe this could take me all the way. But the commitment was, however far it takes me, I want it to grow me as a speaker and as a person. And I was saying to someone, the only way I can explain that voice that I had was like if you go on a first date and you look at someone and think, oh, I could marry this person. You've still got to date them. You've still got to get to know them, but you have that sense. So that's been my journey with the contest, because at each level when they're announcing the winners, I've never had a sense of like, yes, I'm going to win this. I always thought there was another speaker that deserved to also play. So I thought maybe their name was going to be said. So it's been a wonderful delight throughout with this other knowing that was like, maybe this could happen.
Well, the good news is the journey for you wasn't quite like dating frogs, was it? So tell me, as you're here, you've been speaking on the main stage. You're a speaker by profession, but now you've got to adjust to the virtual stage and competing in a virtual stage. What kind of adjustments did you think you had to make to be effective using this particular medium?
I was quite lucky, Mark. At the start of lockdown, my work had to go online, but between work going online and Toastmasters being so quick to also all our meetings went online. So I was getting a lot of time on Zoom, always seated like this. It was only when I watched the conference last year, and particularly Mike Carr's winning performance, when I saw what someone could do with the screen, because I hadn't even thought to do that as a speaker. I was using the chat box, I was interacting with people on the screen, but I'd never thought that you could perform in this funny confined space. So it was only when I entered the contest that I said, right, how do I use this space? How do I have fun with it and feel like I've got an audience with me, even though I can't see them? How do I feel like I'm connecting on the other side of that camera? So it really was a play, record myself, try things at my club meetings. And then I watched all the finalists from last year and got a lot of inspiration from each and every one of them.
Wonderful. Now, you told us earlier, Verity, you're on this journey and doing this dating thing and going through every level, not feeling that confident this time around. Your sister taught you a lesson about that. However, at some point, you begin to think, this is possible. You've won district and you've got a regional semifinal, a semifinal, and then a final. Were you thinking then that this really could be it for me?
It was these two sides. There was one side that was crystal clear that it was meant to happen, and the other side doubted it and was like, really? No, don't be ridiculous. So it's felt like a tug of war. And last Monday, so 2 days before the semifinals, I had a moment of, I burst into tears going, but what if I did win? What if, oh, that's too much. that would be so scary to even imagine that it could happen. And I managed to bring that down. And when I woke up at 3 a.m. to hear that I'd gotten through to the finals, it was just sitting with that of going, okay, you're here, you've got a second speech that you've given everything to, not knowing if you'd ever get to deliver it on this stage. And now just trust that this is what you want to say, and do it from your heart. Because for me, the result is amazing. But in our briefing with Jim, his name escapes me.
The contest chair?
93, no, the winner, the champion.
03, Jim Key?
Jim Key. Sorry,
Yes.
I could see his name. Jim Key gave us such a beautiful briefing for all the finalists. And it was just so much about, here you are 8 people that have worked so hard to get here. But what matters is the message that you've worked on and the people that are going to hear it and the impact that it's going to have. And that briefing for me just centered everything. And I thought, this is just about my speech, my journey, my story. Whatever the results are, I know I just want to come from my heart and I want to come from that place. So Jim's briefing for us really was such a beautiful moment for me.
Well, wonderful. You said it's about your speech, your story, your journey. So let me dive a little bit deeper on that particular point, Verity. How did you arrive at a great read? Can you share a little bit of background on that?
When I won district, I knew there was going to be a wait before we heard if we were through, and I knew I couldn't wait to be working on a second speech. So I wrote 2 different speeches. One was about my dad, an amazing mentorship lesson I'd learned from him, but it wasn't finding it. Then I wrote another one about overcoming my own fear of public speaking, and that wasn't finding it. And what ended up being a great read was a speech that woke me up at 3 a.m, and off I went to start typing. And that was 100 days before the final. And I just had this memory of this time in my life that had been so dark, and that my dad's wisdom had helped me. But it started off as a very different speech. It started off as what I had actually done, which was a challenge on Facebook called 100 Happy Days, to take pictures of things that made me happy. And I wrote that whole speech, and then I delivered it thinking, this is my speech. And all the men that watched it were like, happy days, it's very fluffy. And I was quite upset. I thought this was a universal message. And that's when the work started going, how do I tell the same story, but shift it so that it works for everyone and it doesn't alienate some people in the audience? And the great read only came 2 weeks before the finals, because 2 weeks. So same speech, but I had a different message. And Gary Tintinger, who was our 2017 district representative at the semifinals, he evaluated it at a club meeting and he said, I love your speech and this is working, this is working, this is working. I'm worried about originality. You're basing it on a Wayne Dyer quote and it's wonderful, but I wonder if you might lose points. Can't you find your own, message line? And I was like, what? 2 weeks before? Don't say that to me. But it was the best feedback. I went and I looked at what I'd written. I phoned my sister, who's always on the call for me if I needed her. And we're like, what am I saying? What was Dad telling me to do? And it was write a different story. And with my sister's help and Lance Miller's help, who was coaching me, we got to this write a different story. And then the whole speech for me came together, because the fairy tale analogy came in, the book analogy, and all around the same story. And that's what's interesting for me in the speech writing process, is you can have one story, but the more you work on it, the more you refine it, and suddenly you find the best way to give it to the audience. But I didn't get there on my own. I needed feedback from people for me to see what was missing.
Well, you just told us two very important things. You said you may have one story, but the more you work on it, the more you refine it, it gets better, and you realize you needed help. And you hinted to us you did get some help from world champion '05, Lance Miller, and I have some inside info on that. But what would you say to us is the value of getting coaching, particularly when everyone wants to give you an opinion, left, right, and center? How do you sift through and decide what's best for you?
The coaching is key, Mark, and actually watching your podcast with Darren, I learned a lot about the difference between feedback and coaching. And it was only when I started delivering at clubs that I realized how valuable that insight was, because you're getting feedback all the time. When I sat down with a coach and I had to choose, who am I going to entrust this journey to? And Lance and I had actually met before when I hosted him in South Africa when I was a division director. So there was a lovely connection there. And between him and my sister Kay, who I really trust, she's a fantastic speech mentor, I had to really have, those were the two voices I was going to listen to. And then when I was getting open feedback from clubs, I had to start looking for patterns in the feedback. So the first time I heard something, I'd have to, sometimes it was instant. Oh, that person's got a point. Let me try that. But other times it was like, oh, in my semi-final speech, people kept saying, we need to hear more of what happens at your mom's funeral. What did people say in the book? Because I just used to mention there was a book. And then they said, can we see the book? And after 4 different clubs had said the same thing, then I went and applied the feedback. But my coaching was, I'm trusting this person. I know they're on my side. And if they push me and it's uncomfortable, it's because they see something I can't see yet. And so Lance, I did tell him the first call I had with him, my ego resisted every bit of feedback he was giving me. I was so attached to my semi-final speech. I was like, I've nearly got to district with this. Now he's telling me to change it. I watched myself resisting. But I took notes, and when I got off the call, I gave myself a talking to, and I said, he's a world champion, listen to him, go change your speech. And it was a game changer.
Well, that's interesting, because you're saying you are a world champion now, but you saw the value of getting help from someone who has been where you wanted to be. That being said, I always say you are the president of your presentation. You make the decisions. Looking back, is there anything in your speech you think you would have changed, not only in terms of content, but the way you delivered? Because now the video is out there, over 17,000 views in 3 days, whatever the case may be, and the world is watching, and perhaps you watched yourself a few times. Have you said to yourself, I should have done that, I should have waited here? What are you telling yourself now that you get to see it from the audience's perspective?
Well, the honest truth is I watched it once, and I haven't actually watched it again because I was so glad to not have to deliver it again. I was like, oh, I have dreamt and eaten and slept that speech. But when I did watch it, the thing that I noticed, and I'm very critical of myself, but I was very happy with what I did. In fact, it was better than I thought. It was such a blur in the contest. Suddenly you see the lights come on, you're finished. I was very happy when I saw it. I was like, oh, it came across better than I thought I'd done. But the thing I always see that I always would do different is more pauses. And sometimes I am a speaker who doesn't pause a lot. I have to remember to, but that's the one thing, to do that more. And it's difficult in the virtual space because you're not waiting for a laugh and working with the audience. But that was the big thing. But in terms of, that was the speech I wanted to give. And I'm very grateful. I think it was Dale Carnegie, the 3 speeches, the one you practice, the one you give, and the one you wish you gave.
Yeah.
When you've worked for 100 days on a speech and you've implemented so much feedback and it's suddenly come together, that was the speech I wanted to give. And I feel so grateful because I've never felt like that. My semi-final speech, there were still things I might have changed. But my final speech that was the best that speech was going to be for me. I'm sure it'll grow and change, but I'm so happy. I'm content.
Oh, that's wonderful. I must insert 2 quick comments here. One of my friends, a fellow world champion, Morgan MacArthur, who won in 94, told me, he beat me in 94, but he told me, write a speech you can't wait to give. And having done that, you must really feel, not only have you given the speech you wanted, but you left a message that you wanted. And my other comment is this: I suspect there is a program coming, 100 Days to Your Victory, somewhere in your future. But
I love that.
But with that thought of wanting to give that speech, what was driving, what was burning inside you that said the audience across the world needs to hear this? What was burning in you that said, I must tell them this?
I think we live in a world where we have a lot of rules about what our lives should look like. And I certainly was someone who subscribed to that. I left school thinking it was all going to happen for me and it was going to be perfect because I wanted it. I wanted to be, I wanted to be a famous singer. I wanted to be married. I had all these things I wanted to do. And my life didn't turn out that way. My dad died when I was 24. My mom became an alcoholic. I've had a lot of failed relationships. And I suffered from depression because I couldn't accept that. I was so angry with life that I've worked hard and why is everyone else getting what I want? And my life changed when I accepted where I was. And, at 40 and as a woman, I was very subscribed to that kind of what it's meant to look like. Not all people do have that, but I don't think I'm alone in wanting that. And I had to let it go. And in that letting go, that was when my life changed. And, yes, suddenly it sounds like I had the fairy tale, but if I can give hope that it's never too late. It's never too late to step into something else, to change your story, to turn things around. It might not end up exactly the way you expect, but when you have made peace with that and you realize that you are actually in control of your experience of your life, not necessarily your circumstances, but your experience, that's when life changes. And with where the world is at right now, that's the only place a lot of us can find freedom because we don't have control over our circumstances. So that's why I wanted to share it, because many of us are locked in spare rooms, not by our own choosing. But if it gives someone hope to shift that, then I'm so happy.
Many of us are locked in spare rooms, not of our own choosing. That is lyrical and almost poetic. And I noticed in your presentation, you had some lines that will really catch it, I'm sure would resonate. The line about a scary tale. How did that come about? It's a wonderful line. Everyone I've talked to just loves it. Did you happen upon it? How did you arrive at that particular line?
So I actually thought it was maybe too cheesy. I nearly left it out. It came in 2 days before the finals. I suddenly realized it. So that line came from a few bits of feedback. The one was earlier versions of the speech where my message was, I was saying, look for the good. People felt was a bit soft and going, but your life wasn't that hard and you're making light of depression. So I realized I needed to mention that my ego had a problem with what my life looked like, not that my life was that hard. So I was trying to work that out. And then actually it was feedback I got at Renaissance Speakers, Lance Miller's club. One of his club members said, at the beginning, when you've set up what your life looks like, you need to find a line similar to what Lance had around. I had a couple of roommates named Mom and Dad. It just paints the picture. And suddenly I was like, I've been talking about fairy tales, and for my ego, this was the scary tale. And it just, it was playful. So I'm so glad I stuck it in because I nearly left it out, but my sister heard it. She was like, I love that. Go for it. And I've had a few messages about the scary tale.
Well, see, you say again, you almost left it in, but your sister said, no, you almost took it out. And your sister said, no, leave it in. So talk to Toastmasters who are around the world, who are maybe new, who are struggling with the idea of what do I take out? What do I leave in? Is there a process you can share with us to decide? Are there iterations? What's your process there of sifting through?
It's an interesting one. I mean, obviously in a normal Toastmasters context, you give a speech once and you might deliver it again with a few changes, but it's only in the contest that you really start shaping a speech, which is similar to if you're a professional speaker and you're working on a keynote. I was quite attached to some things. I had a line in my speech around the humor of people always asking if they're on mute in Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
And then I kept getting feedback on my Google Forms, like, that's so done. All the comedians are doing it, leave it out. And I was keeping it in because I thought it was funny. And Lance said, you can't keep something in just because you think it's funny.
Mm.
You know, sometimes listen to your audience and trust that. So it's a lot of refining, but that's why I don't think you can do it on your own. You have to have some safe people that you can bounce things off and learn how to refine, and then also what to put in. Maybe just to give some context, the story stayed the same for a long time. It was how I left the spare room and I'd met my husband and I had a baby. But it was also probably 4 weeks before the finals at one club, someone said, I don't hear the timeline. You're not telling me how long that took. You're telling me to write a different story, but now how quickly will my life change? So then I was like, oh, you need to know that happened after 6 months. That happened after a year. This took 4 years. And that was really useful because I hadn't thought to put it in because you sometimes forget to put yourself in the audience shoes and go, they don't know the story. And what are the gaps for them that need to be in there? So you have to ask someone, what's missing? What didn't make sense to you? What can I add in here?
Well, you just also gave us some wisdom. You said, listen to your audience, because I've learned your audience can help you write your presentation. So I want to dig a little bit deeper on your process in terms of timeline as well. You say 100 days to create this masterpiece. Was there a point in time when you said, I'm not going to lock in my script, this is it, no more changes? And after that, what was your practice routine or rehearsal routine?
So that was probably about 2 days before the finals. I suddenly said, that's enough. Although on the day of the finals, my sister added something in for me, which was kissing my prince. That was new. I had said I met my husband, but suddenly we're like, but you've been kissing frogs, you can kiss a prince. And it just was fun and it was easy to add in. So that we put in. But I didn't actually practice that much towards the end because I was so overwrought and I couldn't see the speech anymore. And I actually had to just let it go and trust that all that work, all that practice would pay off when I did the contest. Otherwise, I would have been rehearsing right up to the end. And that also came from watching probably one of these interviews that was had with Mike Carr after his win last year. He also said he eventually had to stop practicing because you start doubting yourself. So I eventually did let it go and it was pretty locked in, but there was a fluidity when we said, oh, let's add in a fun thing. It was easy to add it in because I was comfortable.
One more question for you regarding that process. Now, when I was competing a gazillion years ago in a previous millennium, it was a little bit different. We had a couple of months between our semifinal, it was called regional back then, and the final in August. In your case, it's a matter of days. What is it like to prepare 2 speeches within a short window? And how do you decide which goes first and which goes second if you have 2 ready? Tell us a bit about that, Verity, please.
I think I was very committed to my district speech was the one I would do for the semifinals. I didn't ever think I could swap them around. So maybe if I'd had that as an option, it would have been a harder choice. But doing 2 speeches concurrently was incredibly challenging. I would log on to clubs and do one speech, get a whole lot of feedback, and then gather myself and do the next speech. So it was a brain twister, I'll put it that way. But again, I mean, when as a speaker do you get to stretch yourself like that? I would never put myself under that pressure, and, you know, learning how two different speeches, two very different styles of delivery in certain ways. But it was full on, and I was so grateful once the semi-final was recorded. I mean, I just let that speech go. It was like, and I'm done. And my brain was like, oh, I can just focus on one. So I recommend that just focusing on one. But it does, I'm sure all the semi-finalists would agree with me that the process will have grown them as speakers and as presenters.
Well, in terms of the growth, just being in the contest, how would you define or describe your growth over the last 6 or 8 months?
Sure. It's shown me that I can put everything into something and go for it and commit and just trust myself that I've decided to pick a path and go for it. And I think through the coaching process, and I spoke briefly about it earlier with Lance, was it made me confront my ego and realizing how quickly I can get attached to thinking what I'm doing is working, and then having to go have a growth mindset, listen, take that feedback. Don't assume you've got this sorted. You know, if someone's saying something, consider it, see if you can shift. So it's really taught me to be a lot more open to feedback, a lot more flexible in just quickly changing and pivoting and not being, but that's the way I'm doing it. And I've mentored a lot of speakers, so I know what it's like. Someone goes, but that's my story and that's what happened. And you're saying, don't ruin a good story with the facts, and they don't want to listen. I was that person. So the growth has come from getting feedback at an 8 a.m. meeting and adapting it and applying it at a 12 p.m. meeting and just practicing and going and changing. Because I think if I can take that into my business and into the rest of my life, it's going to be a life skill.
Now for the 2 tough questions. I wring my hands, the evil 2 questions. What is the one thing, first part, you learned about audiences and virtual audiences through this process? And part 2 is, what is the most important thing you learned about Verity Price going through this process?
Wow. So virtual audiences is an interesting one, because in the contest space, you are literally performing to your own picture. It's really strange. It's like being in the bathroom, chatting to yourself in the mirror. So that was quite confronting initially. But in fact, when I went to clubs where people didn't switch their cameras off, that was even stranger, because then you saw someone having a cup of tea and someone shouting at someone, and it's very hard to remain focused. So in a contest virtual audience space, it's an unusual one, very different to if I'm running an event where I'm the online MC and I can be interacting with people. I didn't have that opportunity. So the virtual audience is, you've got to trust yourself. You've got to trust that what you've worked on is landing and that the humor is landing, even if you can't get that feedback. And that's when you've got to pause as if they're laughing, even though you don't know that they are. It's really strange. But it's been a good journey, but I do look forward to the more interactive Zoom meetings where I can see faces and we can use the chat box. But what have I learned about Verity Price? I've learned that I don't give up on my dreams. And even though I put them on the shelf for a long time, I had a dream at 20 that I had something to say to the world. I started writing songs, and I thought I would share my message with the world through songs. And then that didn't quite work out. And then I was speaking, but at a small level. And suddenly at 46 years old, I've been given this opportunity to share my words, my message with the world. And it's a privilege, and it's humbling, and I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful that I showed up and I committed, and my husband said yes to putting our 2-year-old to bed so that I could practice over and over again. And yeah, I just discovered I was way more tenacious than I realized.
You discovered your tenacity. Well, I speak personally, but I believe there are at least 85,000 people who might agree with me on this. You also you spoke a message of hope to all of us. It is never too late to pursue a dream. I do have to ask a personal question also. In all this process, How did the prince handle his role as your supporter, as your spouse, as the father of your child, as your life partner? What was that like for him as well?
He would tell you that he became a frog at some points because it was really tiring. But he was unbelievable. And he never doubted for a second. He kept saying to me, "You're doing this because you're going to win." And I was like, "No, come on, let's." And he just said, "I've got such a sense that this is why you're putting in this time." And he picked up the slack, but it's not easy. We've got a beautiful 18 months old when I started this journey. That's a lot of bedtime routines, dad running around after a baby, but he did it. And getting up at 7 in the morning, getting kicked out of our bedroom so I could practice speeches. It was extraordinary.
Well, having that support is so important. I realize that. And now you have made it to the world stage. You have won this contest. And when I won mine 26 years ago, I didn't fully comprehend what that meant. Now, the images of the video have gone globally, and you are now a presence in the Toastmasters world. What's next for the 2021 World Champion of Public Speaking?
It's quite something hearing that title, my word. Gonna take it in. For me, Mark, it's really to keep building on the work I already do. I am already a speaker, and I speak on mindset and on thinking differently and how to overcome your obstacles. And what this speech has done is it's given me a new way to hold that message. So I want to turn a great read into a keynote, into a workshop that I can offer to people so that they can use the tools that I've learned over the last 10 years in my work, specifically positive psychology tools and habits that make the difference with writing a different story. So I'm letting it percolate. I feel like there could be a book in there somewhere, but I'm excited to take what was a 7-minute speech and turn it into a broader offering that can help people to actually do what I did. And that's the 100 days, the gratitude, the reframing problems. There's very specific steps that I did that obviously I couldn't cover in a 7-minute speech. So that's my next step, is how to add more value with that message.
Oh, I am so excited to hear that, because so many people believe I win the world title, I've got a great speech, whoa, I will now conquer the world. But I so admire your intent. And you say you want to create, no, you will create the keynote, you will create the workshop, you will write the book, you may even do a podcast. I'm predicting for you here, Verity. But I deeply appreciate that you take this message that you have and now see it as a tool you can then share with the world out there. And I'll be honest with you, I can't wait to hear what you have to show the world. There is one last part of your life I want to touch on briefly. I'm made aware you do sing like a bird, and you have done some vocal work, you've recorded some music. Do you ever sing in your presentations?
I do. I finish my 2 keynotes finish with songs, so it's always lovely. I get to have my pop star moment at the end of the keynote. And whenever I run workshops for companies, or a strategy session or a thinking workshop, I never get away without them asking me to sing. So I've learned to sing in the strangest situations and funny little pokey rooms, but again, it's an opportunity to share my message in a different way, and I'm always grateful for that.
Well, in the last 2 minutes that we got 2 minutes to go in our conversation today, Verity, did you consider or think about singing as part of your world champion speech?
I didn't. I felt like it would be strange to do. So no, I didn't. I've loved it for I know it's been done before and was wonderful, but it wasn't relevant. Maybe if there'd been a different speech, it might have worked, but not for this one.
Well, I want to thank you for saying that, because my last comment is this. You have given us nuggets today about how you think, about relevance, what you leave in, what you take out. And you've taken us partway through the process you went through as you developed this presentation. Going forward, you said you want to do a keynote, workshop, book, and maybe more as part of your message. I don't think you realize, Verity, what the world is going to require of you. Expect requests from districts and clubs all over the world. They'll want to hear your message of resilience, of hope, of being able to hold on to your dream and see your dream becoming realized right now. You've told us what your next steps are going to be. I would encourage you to enjoy what you have accomplished, to continue to share your messages. And I do have one more question for you. For the new Toastmasters who will look in awe and say, oh my goodness, a woman from South Africa has won the world championship. Is it possible that I can be a world champion too? What do you say to answer the question I have been asked by women all over the world for 20 years? How can women be more prominent, and what can we do to win the world championship? And by answering this, you will let me and my brothers off the hook.
I love it. I think as women, we have to own our stories. We have to be comfortable talking about uncomfortable things and find a message that speaks to everyone. I think that I spoke about wanting a fairy tale. It's a very female thing, but I've found a way that it applied for men as well. I've had so many men reach out and say what that message meant for them, and that makes me so happy. So we need to own our stories, but find the universal appeal and message in it. And I think for women, we carry a lot. And if this had not been a virtual conference, I couldn't have done this. I've got a little boy. It would have been really difficult to travel. So we need partners that support us. And without my husband, Greg, picking up that slack, I wouldn't have had the capacity to do this. And I honestly think that's a main reason why women haven't always featured, is that they haven't had the time available to them to commit those 6 months to just their goals. And I stand corrected on that, but it's a sense that I have. And as women, we sometimes have to own that we want to do something and we want to have an impact. And then we need to set up the support structure around us so that we can get out there and share our voice, our word, our message in our way. And there's so much space for women to be on this stage. And I'm just so privileged to be one of many to come.
Final question. What are your closing words of encouragement to anyone who is considering entering the International Speech Contest?
Enter. You have to be in it to win it. Enter. But look at those who've come before you. I watched Mark, I've watched your speeches, I've watched all the world championships, learn from what the champions have done, and then find your story, find what it is you want to talk about and do it for you, because the outcome is not guaranteed, but the journey is an exceptional one, however far it takes you, and just commit to seeing where it takes you and how it grows you as a person and as a speaker.
Verity Price, the 2021 World Champion of Public Speaking, thank you for your time today. You are at the beginning of your new journey, and we just can't wait to see where it leads you. Friends, once again, I am Mark Brown, the 1995 World Champion of Public Speaking. It's been my joy, my pleasure, and my privilege to introduce you to our newest world champion, Verity Price. Keep speaking and keep changing your world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.